Okay, good evening, Inner Circle. Inner Circle Unite. We are going to be talking about contracts and negotiations tonight. We're in a series called Wholesaling, and as you'll see on my screen here, this is the top secret level information on all the stuff that we're going to be filling in the blanks here over the next little while. But wholesaling is this series is contracts and negotiations, selling to buyers, wholetailing, phone scripting, and in-home appointments. These are like the five key things to be talking about to uh, learn us some wholesaling. So starting out with contracts and negotiations is going to be tonight. This series will also be recorded. All of these will be recorded. And as you can see, we're going from gospel training, top business tips, marketing, funding, wholesaling, rehabbing, rentals, evaluations, and exit strategies. This is basically how to run a real estate investing business, guys. And we're starting tonight with contracts and negotiations. So, yeah, this is what we're going to do. So I say we get to doing it. I'm going to open up a screen here, and I'm just going to go ahead and dive right in. If you guys have a question, there's a chat box in here. Just write that in. I will unmute you, and you can ask your question. Just say, I've got a question, and then we can have a little interaction. Yeah, so this is what we're going to be doing here tonight, guys. There's two main contracts that we can use to purchase real estate, and we're going to be going over both of them. If you are a realtor or if you're not a realtor, is that basically how we're going to separate this out. And you really can't talk about contracts without a little bit of negotiation. We're going to do some advanced negotiation techniques when we get into top business tips. So stay tuned for that. But for the contract purposes, I'm going to tell you like the difference between writing an offer for sale by owner or a private seller or a listed property or trying to sell a property and they're working with an agent. I mean, there's a lot of different things. So we're going to get into some negotiation tips and techniques as well. So I guess just kind of getting started in here, let's go to the first contract here, contract to purchase real estate. This is the contract provided by Mr. Rick Gibson. He is a fellow Inner Circle member for a couple years, and he's also an attorney, and he put this contract set together that could not be any simpler, okay? So it's a one-page contract. It's real simple, doesn't make someone intimidated. You want to use this contract primarily when you're buying property from a private seller, a for sale by owner, okay? Someone who is selling you a house as is. This is probably going to be the best application for this contract. And the reason why is because if you're going to be submitting an offer for a listed property, they're going to want to use a realtor form, like a board approved form, which is right in here. The St. Louis Association of Realtors has zip forms and Forms R Us. I use zip forms, and this is a residential sales contract. Let me see if I can pull this up. Open new form. And this is a residential sales contract, more than likely what you're going to be using when you buy a property that is a listed property. Actually, to be more specific and precise, a special sales contract. Let's see if I can pull that up. Special sales contract right here is what you'll be using. Which there's very little difference between a special sales contract and a residential sales contract. I'm not going to really go into the difference. I think it's only one paragraph now. But we'll get to this in a second. This is what you're going to be using more than likely if you're working with a realtor to buy a listed property. Okay. So let's get into this here, this contract to purchase real estate. The reason why I like this one-page contract is because it's very simple and it covers your butt in a very simplistic way. Okay. If you didn't have any training on this contract, you could use this contract just by filling in the blanks because It is not only is it a one pager, but it comes with instructions. So the legend here is field number one is this is the date of the contract is signed. It will trigger the start of your due diligence and inspection period. Field number two is the name of the buyer. It can be you individually or your company. So you could go through down the line here and pretty much just go through and say, okay, what is line 7? What is line 9? Well, line 9 is you have to check one. It's pretty simple, okay? But it's pretty simple to do. So the reason why I like this one page is because when you're talking with a seller, guys, they're mainly worried about if you can close on it, if you got the money, if you're a real buyer, and what are they going to get for the property. They want to try to get as much as they possibly can, right? And they need to get rid of the property in most cases pretty quickly, okay? So when you're, if you have a 6-page or 7-page special sales contract and you were to go through line by line, okay, well, this says this, this says this, this says this, it raises a lot of questions, and you might get the dreaded, oh, well, I need to have this run by my attorney. Oh my gosh, you do not. Well, I mean, it's just a regular contract. It's not going to be anything that an attorney is going to say, oh, these guys are shysters. But even still, like, that's just, I don't know. I have been a very long time since someone said, I need to have my attorney look at this. This is a one-page contract. It's very simple. I'm going to buy your property for this amount, closing on this date, at this title company, sign here. Okay. You probably heard me say this before, but I'm going to say it again. A long time ago, there was a speaker at SSIC. His name was Keith Emkin, and he's with We Buy Ugly Houses, Home Investors. And he was giving a great talk, and he was pontificating about his greatness in the real estate investing industry. And he was doing a really great job. And he got done, and he opened the floor up to questions. I decided to be the first person to ask a question because just to kind of get the questions going. And I asked a question, hey man, I'm having a hard time getting sellers to accepting my offer. You have any suggestions? And it was kind of a real thing. I was having a hard time getting sellers to accept my offers. But I really was just trying to get the questions started. But he snapped his fingers, looked right at me, and said, people do business with people that you like, or people that they like. And everyone kind of laughed, ha ha ha, no one likes Nick Bauer, that's why they weren't accepting my offers. But it couldn't have been any more true. I wasn't spending time building a rapport with the person at the house. Okay, I really wasn't doing that. So what I ended up doing was, I don't know why I did this, but I was going over the contract and making sure they felt comfortable with what they were signing. But the problem with that is all I was doing was raising questions and just, creating doubt when there didn't need to be doubt. It was really strange. I just kind of worked myself into a corner, and I actually needed a jolt to kind of get out of that because I didn't realize that I was in a rut, but I kind of was in a rut. The next day, I actually went and bought a house for $3,500 and got them to be on Team Nick by just building rapport with them and just telling them I'm a real person and just talking to them. And I didn't even mention the contract. It was crazy. So just that small little adjustment for me helped in approaching sellers and talking to them. And so what I'm trying to say and bring this back to contracts here is really this is an important document that's going to protect you. It's going to get you to the closing table. But at the same time, if you spend a bunch of time on this with the homeowner, it's just going to raise a lot of questions, create a lot of doubt. And really what we're trying to do is write an offer that the sellers accept. That's what we're really trying to do, okay? So with this one-page contract, what I would suggest you do, if this is the only contract you have access to, then you're going to be fine. This is absolutely a good enough contract for you to use. Read it. Don't read it when you're talking with the seller. Okay, know the contract backwards and forwards, and know what the time frames mean. Know what it all does, so that if a seller does ask you, you can confidently answer without having to read it and say, "Well, I don't know. I don't know how that works." Okay, that's going to create a lot of doubt. That's going to probably get the response, "Well, I might have to have my attorney look at this." Okay, we want to write an offer that the seller is going to accept, and it's not going to raise any red flags, and it's just going to be simple. Okay. Now, when we're writing an offer, the most important things that the seller is going to be looking for is what is the price and when's this thing going to close? Okay, so that's about the only thing I go over with the seller when we have a contract. Okay, so the purchase price is going to be on line 1 here, and I think that is number 6. Okay, right here, number 6. That's the purchase price, and then the closing date is going to be let's see here. Well, the title company goes on line 7, and then let's see, where is the closing? I don't use this one, so when is closing date on this? Closing should be no longer than 10 days from the date signed below. Oh, no, not 10 days. My gosh, that's number 10. This date, my gosh, okay. Let's see. Okay, so what he does here is just you write in how many days that it's going to take to close. That makes sense. Okay, so that's what you put the closing date in here. You put the purchase price here, and this is what I say. If I were to explain this to a seller, I would say, okay, guys, here's me, the buyer. I'm going to pay $100,000 for your house. We're going to close it up at Insight Title or Freedom Title, whatever title company I'm going to close this up at. The closing date, and you can sign right here. That's it. That's all I'm going to explain to them. If they have a question, I'd be more than happy to answer them. But really, the main questions you're going to get is purchase price and when can you close. Okay. Sometimes closing might be a big issue for them because they don't know if they have another place to go, so they might need 30 days to close. Okay, so when we get into actually advanced negotiations, talking about if-then negotiations, which is if I do this, then will you do this? Instead of conceding to anything, you just put a hypothetical out. We'll get to that later. But what we'll want to do here is really hone in on what their issue is. And work around that and be accommodating. If their issue is, I can't be out in 2 weeks, okay, excellent, that's fine. We can close it up in 30 days, 45 days, however long it's going to take you to get out and secure housing on the end, or whatever the case may be. We can work with you on that. Or if I were to do that, then would you accept my price? Okay. So that's something that we can do. But yeah, that's again what I'm going to say is here's my company name, Real Estate Rehab LLC. I'm going to pay $100,000 for your house. We're going to close it up on this date. Sign here, and you can print your name. It's that simple. That's about all I'm going to do to explain this. Again, going back to what I used to do is I would go through this special sales contract line by line and say, well, this is what earnest money is. This is what the closing date is. This is what title work does. This is what closing costs might be. This is, the section on earnest money. This is the section on remedies. I would go through this section by section, and by the time I got to the end, I talked myself out of a deal because they're like, "Wait a minute here, what's going on? There's so much legal stuff. I'm gonna have to read this, right?" Even if I'm using a special sales contract, I'll do the same thing. Here's the price that I'm going to pay. Here's the closing date. You can sign here at the very end. You can sign right here. That's about all I do to do this. And again, the first time I did it, guys, it worked. Because now what I can do is I can spend a lot more time actually talking with the homeowner and getting them on Team Nick and letting them know that I'm a real person, that I've got a wife, that I got kiddos, and this is what I do for a living, and I buy houses and I sell them to other people. And you know, I think we could do some pretty good stuff with your house. Would you like to come back in when we're done and see it? You know, if they grew up in the house, sometimes that's a thing that they might want to do. Yeah, I'd love to come back and see it when you're done. Awesome. You know, I'll make sure to give you a call before we put it on the market or whatever the case may be. I mean, now I have the time to do that and really make sure that I'm focused on them, because this is I mean, if you're talking with someone, whether it's a referral from Facebook, a referral from church, or someone that you know is trying to sell a house, or a lead that you marketed for, or whatever the case may be, you're going to want to make sure that you build that rapport with that person at the house. Okay, and we're going to go into more tips on that later on in this series on how to actually do that, because the being on the phone is is a very specific skill set that you have to master on any lead that might come in, whether again it's a referral or a lead that you marketed for. And then the actual in-home appointment is also something that you have to get down and what you have to bring to the in-home appointment. But again, with contracts here, the main thing is just to keep it simple. So whether you're using Rick Gibson's a contract that he put together, which is very simple to do, or a special sales contract, when you're presenting it to the homeowner, you want to be very, very quick with what you're doing. Again, not pulling wool over someone's eyes, but if you read line by line by line, you're going to raise more doubt, more questions than you would just by saying, okay, I'm willing to pay $100,000 for your house. I'll close it up within 30 days. Sign right here. It's not contingent upon financing. You can sign right here. Okay. Now, for the purpose of contract training, though, let's dive in so that if you are using a special sales contract, let's talk about a couple things. First of all, when we write an offer to a seller that is a private seller, a for sale by owner, a FSBO, or just a private seller, or even another investor that's selling their property. Well, no, let's not go there yet. Let's go to just that we're doing it from a private seller. So from a private seller's standpoint, guys, we want to put as little in earnest money as possible. Let's actually fill out this special sales contract here. Today's date's going to be 6/6/2018. Real estate rehab. I'm going to go ahead and fill this out in real time. Real estate rehab LLC in the municipality of St. Louis, county of St. Louis City, because that's kind of weird. St. Louis is its own county. And the address is going to be 5555 Devonshire, which is the first house I ever bought, guys. Look it up sometime. It's kind of cool. All right, so I would probably have a lot of this stuff pre-filled out. I wouldn't be filling this out in front of the house. And a lot of times, guys, what we're doing is we're emailing these docs to these folks, and they're just signing them from their phone. Okay, we use a program called .loop, and this is we just fill it out on our computer, send it to them, and they sign it. Okay, but we'll have a lot of this stuff already pre-filled out. And broker training in me says you should never have a blank on a contract. That's a really good tip, guys. Never have a blank on a contract. Always put in NA or this section is not included or something like that. That's just a side note here. But okay, so $100,000 is the price that I'm going to pay. I'm going to give that person $10 in earnest money. Okay, and it's going to be delivered to Insight Title. Okay, and let's see, NA. So to make a contract valid and enforceable, there has to be valuable consideration attached to it, and that's typically earnest money. It could be a boat title, it could be a gold ring, it could be a pet rabbit, it could be anything, okay? But most commonly it's earnest money, and it's held with an escrow agent, and that title company, your title company, is the escrow agent, okay? So when I when I explain this to a seller, I'm not going to say, "Hey, I'm only putting $10 in earnest money. Is that okay? I'm only putting $100 in earnest money. Is that okay?" I'm just going to say I'm willing to pay $100,000. It's not contingent upon financing. I'm going to close it within 30 days. Sign here. Okay. If they were to ask about earnest money, um, I would say, yeah, okay, I'm going to put $10 in earnest money. Jamie says $10 really. And I guess more precise, I probably do $100. But for the purpose of tonight, we could put $1 in there, okay? It's only going to be an issue if I make an issue out of it. Very few times has anyone given me any pushback on this. And my standard answer is if they say, whoa, I would like to see a little bit more money in earnest, would you be willing to go up? If then negotiations needs to kick in, first of all, I'm not going to concede to anything unless I do an if then negotiation thing. If I were to come up in earnest money, would you then accept my offer? Okay. But before I even go there, my canned answer is, listen, we buy a lot of houses, and I might have 4 or 5 properties under contract right now that I'm going to be closing on. And as a company policy, we don't put that much in earnest money down for a variety of reasons. One being, we've had it before where the seller just completely went AWOL, and my money is in an escrow account that will not be released for 5 years. If you decide to skip town, the title company will not issue my earnest money back to me without your signature. So I'm not willing to put that money up. As a company policy, we don't have a lot of earnest money for these properties because of that issue. That happened a couple times in a row to us, and we got burned. I have a lot of money out there in escrow accounts that still needs to come back to me, and I got to wait 5 years for it to be unclaimed, if you can believe that. So I'm not willing to do that. As a company, we don't do that. That's kind of my canned answer. It makes sense. It is legitimate. It is for real, and that normally satisfies them. If they still want more earnest money, well, how bad do you want the house? If I were to come up in earnest money, then would you sell me the house? Okay. So the first thing is your canned answer and why, a legitimate reason and why you don't want to put more earnest money up. And let's be honest, guys. If you're buying 10 houses from private sellers in a month and you got $1,000 in each one, well, you got $10,000 out of pocket before you even buy a house. Okay. Then you got maybe a sewer lateral inspection. Maybe you got to get a roofer to get up there and pay him a couple $100 to do that. Maybe an inspector. I mean, you might have all of a sudden $13,000-$14,000 out of your pocket before you even close on those 10 houses. So I would not suggest doing that. Now, if you're going to be buying a listed property, like a bank foreclosure or just a deal that's out there that's a pretty good deal, it's just listed and you found it on the MLS, that agent is going to require more than $10 in earnest money. Okay, that's just industry standard is probably 1% of the sales price. Okay, so if it's a $200,000 house that you got, you're probably going to have to put at least $1,000, if not $2,000 in earnest money. That is standard, and agents don't want to waste their time with people that don't put up enough valuable consideration. So don't get confused thinking, oh, well, Nick said that, hey, I can just go buy properties and just put $10,000 or $10 in earnest money. Well, you will run into trouble when you try to do that with an agent. Just trust me on that. They're not going to allow that. They're going to want to see more earnest money. But for a standard homeowner that is just selling their house, it's a private seller, I don't even mention the earnest money. Okay, I just say I'm willing to pay $100,000, not contingent upon financing. I'm going to close it on this date. Sign here. Okay, and this is normally after we've kind of already agreed on price. So we're not really necessarily going back and forth on paper. Normally, when we write the contract, it's a agreed upon price, and so we've already been discussing everything, and now it's just a formality to sign it. Okay. But for contract training here, let's continue on. Method of financing, not contingent upon financing. If it's not contingent upon financing, just click here. Make sure you're pre-approved with a hard money lender, or you have cash, or you've got a private lender, or you have a line of credit, or you have something that's going to allow you to do this. If you haven't been pre-approved, have a line of credit, or have cash, or any of that stuff, then I don't know if I would click that if I were you. Okay, so if you're working with a realtor to buy a listed property, you probably can have a contingency period, okay? And I'm not going to get into all the details and how this works out, but you can say the loan amount that you're trying to get, the amortization term, the interest rate that you're trying to get, whether you're going conventional or FHA or VA. I mean, you can get kind of granular with this and really enter all that stuff in, but most of the time, we're going to be doing it not contingent upon financing. Why do sellers want to work with us? Because they don't have to pay agent fees, and we have cash or have the ability to close on properties like the one that they're selling. Okay, so you want to try to make a clean contract with these folks, and that's why if you have a very clean contract and maybe even someone has a little bit higher price than you, maybe they're willing to pay 105, but you make yours not contingent upon financing, they might take it. Okay, because you're more of a guaranteed sale. Okay. You can also, again, if you're buying a listed property, you can ask the seller to pay some closing costs. But when we're buying it from a private seller, that's one of the things is we don't ask for closing costs, we don't ask for agent fees or anything like that. So we're probably not going to be doing that for a private seller. Okay, closing of possession is going to be 6/25/2018. Going to close it up then. I'm going to get possession at closing, which is, or I can put in a time that I'm going to get possession. Let's just go ahead and make it simple and say when it closes, that's when I get possession. Okay. Buyer's going to order and provide and purchase title. That means I'm going to get with the title company and give them this contract, have them research the title, have them issue me title insurance, and that's going to be on my dime. It's not going to be on the seller's dime. The seller is going to have some closing costs, and you'll probably get that question. Well, what kind of closing costs will I get? Well, probably not much, but it's probably going to be a couple $100. There's a closing fee, there's a recording fee, and just a couple miscellaneous things like that. It shouldn't be much. Guys, and if you're selling a property, it's really anywhere from $300 to $500 depending upon just a couple, like what title company that you close at. It's not much closing costs to sell a house, so you can tell them that it's very easy to do. Okay. If there's a defect in the property, then a defect in the title, like if there's a cloud on the title or there's an old lien that hasn't been paid off or something like that, the technicalities of this, you'll work with your title company on this. They'll tell you about all that stuff. But again, don't have a blank on the contract. Always fill something in, either NA or a date, or the days that need to be there, but just put 25 days if none stated. That gives you ample time for your title company to research the title. And then you go back to the seller and say, hey, there's an old lien from 1985, a mechanic's lien that has never been paid off. You know anything about this? Yeah, I can track down that contractor and get that taken care of. Okay, cool, because you want to make sure that you have free and clear title when you buy this property. Okay, doesn't come up too much, but sometimes it does, and just at least knowing how to deal with it is one thing. So then if you go down here, I will talk about this, but and only to kind of educate you guys, not so that you are going to be going over with this with the homeowner. Okay. Adjustments in closing costs. This talks about what the buyer shall pay for, and the seller is going to be responsible to pay for. Okay. Loss. This is actually kind of a good clause here. What happens if the house burns down 2 days before closing? Do you still have to buy it? No. The answer is no. It is the seller's responsibility to get the house back up into the same condition as when you saw the property and made an offer on it. Okay. So if something happens to the property, it gets broken in, all the copper gets taken out of, well, it's the seller's responsibility to have that stuff fixed, or they can give you a credit to move on. Okay. So if it's $2,500 to fix, maybe they give you $3,000 and say sorry. Okay. But it's their insurance. If they want to make a claim, it's their responsibility to get it up, and that's it's a good thing to have that clause in there. Assignability of the contract. One of the great things I like about our board-approved forms is you can assign this contract. You don't have to put Real Estate Rehab LLC and/or assigns. You don't have to do that. Assignability of this contract. This contract is assignable, so you can assign this contract to somebody else. We will talk about assigning. Well, I'll just mention this here real quick. I'm going to mention it again, but I don't assign contracts anymore for a few reasons, but mainly what I do is I will, if I'm selling to one of you guys, I'm just going to go ahead and enter into a new contract with you. It's going to cost me about $500 to do that, because it's $300 to $500 to do that. Whereas if I were to just assign you my contract and there's a $7,000 fee, well, then I would get all $7,000. But I don't do that anymore unless it's someone like Craig and I've sold him several houses and he's bought several houses from me and I know he's going to close. And if I'm selling you guys a house, you're probably going to close on it. Otherwise, you'll get your kneecaps adjusted by someone in the middle of the night. But really, I don't assign the contract because you're assigning away a lot of rights and your name is still on the line. Okay. So yes, you can assign this contract, and we have in the contract sent here, we have an assignment of contract form that you can use, but I would only do that to someone like that you've sold a couple properties to before. It is the easy button, and yes, you can do it. But if it's a big buyer that has bought lots of properties from other people, and you feel comfortable doing that, you can. Let's move on, though, just to let you know that this contract is assignable with this clause, and you do not need the seller's permission to assign this contract to somebody else, unless there's any type of owner financing in play, which sometimes happens. But for now, let's just go ahead and move on. That is covered in here. Okay. Earnest money. This talks about earnest money and how that works. Guys, there's a couple different ways that earnest money can be distributed. If I put $1,000 in earnest money, I can get that money back in several ways. The first and most common way is I close on the house. So if it's a $100,000 house and I have $100,000 in earnest money, I need to bring $99,000 to the closing table and some change for closing costs. Okay, that's the most common way that earnest money is distributed. Second most common way it's distributed is if I have a sewer scope inspection and it needs an $8,000 sewer to be put in, and it makes my numbers all out of whack and the seller isn't willing to come down. Well, then I'm going to sign a mutual release with the seller that's going to release this contract. I'm going to take that to the title company, and the title company is going to give me my money back. Okay. Third way, which is a way that you don't want this to be distributed, is if you do not close or you have an inspection and you're out of your inspection period and you decide to terminate the contract, you're going to lose your earnest money, and that earnest money then will be distributed to the seller. Okay? That's just kind of how earnest money works. Again, to have a contract valid and enforceable, you have to have valuable consideration attached to it. It is most commonly earnest money, and that is held at a third-party escrow agent, which is your title company, and they cannot distribute those funds without either you performing on the contract and all parties perform and you get that earnest money back applied towards a purchase price, or you have another agreement in place that is going to release that money to one of the parties. Okay. Remedies. This actually is kind of interesting. Um, this says basically that you're going to try, if someone is in default of this contract for whatever reason, before you start making calls to your attorneys, that you're going to try to work things out. Okay. Like for instance, if you, I've had this before. I think I've done it maybe where I just almost forgot a closing date. Like, oh my gosh, I got to close on this property tomorrow. I totally forgot that I had this thing under contract. Okay. It might inconvenience the seller, but if I ask them for a couple days to get my stuff together because I was procrastinating, they will probably say, yeah, okay, instead of closing Wednesday, let's close it on Monday. Okay. But some people might not be so forgiving. So before we hire an attorney to sue and go all that kind of stuff, let's talk it out and try to figure it out. Maybe they'll do it till Monday, but they want another $300 for the inconvenience. That might be a fair deal. Okay. Normally it's the other way around where I'm trying to close on something and the seller needs a couple extra days or something like that. Life happens. What if or what if someone's father just passed away, or life comes at you hard. You get in a car accident, and you're in a hospital and you can't close. Well, this basically is saying, in good faith, we're going into this contract, but if someone should default before we hire an attorney, we're going to try to work it out before we go to the courts. Okay. Construction talks about the terms that are used. Floodplain. This is interesting. Buyer may terminate the contract if any portion of the property is located in a floodplain, unless it was previously disclosed to the buyer prior to the contract. That's a good thing. There's a real easy way if you are a realtor or have access to a realtor's knowledge base. Actually, I'm going to show you this right now because this is kind of pertinent to what I'm talking about. In the MLS, there's a very easy way to find out if a property is in a floodplain. I think you can go on FEMA's website as well. I've had difficulty before, and I stopped a while ago looking there because it was kind of hard to see their maps. But you can get that information. So I just don't know exactly how to do it. But let me pull up a property here. Stop. Let me pull up a property here and show you. Let me show you what this looks like. Huh. Why isn't it looking at that? Let's do this. Okay. So let's see here. All right, let's just pull this up here and let's go to the map. And then you can go to layers here and you can put flood zone and it'll say if it's in a flood zone or not. It's kind of cool. So obviously this is in the city, but it's out of special flood zone area. Okay. So if you were expanded, it's going to take a minute to render, but any property that you look in, it's going to just say it's going to be color coded whether it's in a floodplain or not. So it's really good information to know. Most of the areas I kind of know. If it's close to certain areas, I look it up on here just to make sure. But yeah, this is a way to do that. And if it's not previously disclosed to you and you find that out, you can terminate the contract because that might greatly affect the price that you could sell it for. It might not, but it might. And also it would make it more expensive because you have to have flood insurance. Okay. Access final walkthrough and utilities. You want to make sure that the day you close, you go back over there and take a look at everything. Make sure that the property is in the same general condition as when you first saw it, that if they moved all their stuff out, they didn't ding up a bunch of walls, they didn't take a bunch of stuff that they shouldn't have taken, and they kept the stuff that you were supposed to keep. Or if you asked them to do a couple things through the inspection period, if they had to change out the electric panel, let's just say that that's the case, then you want to make sure that that was done in a workmanship-like manner. Okay, so you have the right to do that before you close on it. And if not, then you need to go back, or if you do and something's not quite right, you have the opportunity to go to them and say, hey, you need to make it right. Okay. That might not be as prevalent when you're buying from a private seller, that you're going to have them do some work or anything like that. But if you're buying a listing property, you might go through your inspection period and say, hey, listen, your plumbing stack's leaking, and I would like you to fix that before I buy this house. That's your opportunity to make sure that it was done and done correctly. Okay, now special agreements. This is where it's going to get a little fun, okay? Up until this point, it's pretty standard stuff. It's pretty simple, just fill in the blank kind of stuff, right? But now this is where we can put our additional overlays in that's going to make us a little bit more protected, okay? So let's go back in here to the form section, purchase and assignment contracts on Inner Circle's website, clauses for board approval, okay? And this is basically what I'm going to use clauses for to do some additional things here. And under the special agreement section, paragraph 18, I'm going to put some clauses in. This is tailored to buying properties from private sellers, individual sellers, okay? Properties being sold as is with seller to do no repairs or provide inspections. Seller agrees to allow buyer the right to inspect, tour, or view subject property prior to close upon seller's acceptance of this contract. Seller to allow buyer to place a lockbox at the property for this purpose. Buyer shall have 15 business days from the date of contract acceptance as keys being provided to the buyer to perform inspections. Buyer to find inspections satisfactory in buyer's sole judgment. If buyer does not find property satisfactory, this contract shall be null and void, and all earnest money shall be returned to the buyer. Okay, this is after years experience, guys. Listen to all the gurus, watching other people how they do it. This is kind of what I've come up with for me, and also to get your offer accepted. Okay, so property is being sold as is with seller to do no repairs or provide inspections. That's the first thing that I'm going to put there on this line right here. And the reason why I'm going to put that first is because I may, just may, talk about that. I might say, okay, here's me, here's my buyer. I'm willing to pay $100,000 for it. It's not contingent upon financing. It's closing on 6/25. You're selling it as is. You can sign here. Okay, so that's the first thing that I'm going to put there. I will be honest with you, a lot of times people ask about the lockbox. So I need to have a response for the lockbox that makes sense. Listen, we have a lot of properties that we buy, and we really like to have a lockbox at the property so that we can have access to the property for our inspections and to have contractors available to give us bids so that we can be getting people lined up to start working on this house. Okay, I can make sure that anytime anyone's over at your house, we'll be accompanying with them, and that I'll also call you when we're going to go over there. But it's a standard procedure with our company to make sure that we can have access to the property. That's going to give you, if you can get a lockbox with a key in the lockbox in that on that property, that's going to make life so simple for you. How hard is it to get a painter to even call you back right now? How hard is it to get a roofer to show up and give you a bid? Okay, it's hard. Everyone's slammed right now, right? So it's, imagine trying to coordinate 3 or 4 different subs to go over there to get you a bid. If they don't live in this house, if they live in, you know, St. Genevieve and their mom's house was in St. Anne and they're trying to sell this, they don't want to come up all the time to let our people in. We don't want to inconvenience them, so it's just easier to have the lockbox on there. Okay, if they live in the property, that might be that might be an issue, but it probably will be an issue. But again, we try to ask for this, and if they say no, well, then we want to make sure. Remember, if then negotiations, if I take this out, then would you be able to be available every single time that we need to have someone come over and take a look at this thing? Oh, I don't know about that. Okay, well, it's just easier to put a lockbox on there, you know? So you just got to make sure that you have, it makes sense. I mean, more than likely, you're going to be able to get a painter's bid. You're going to be able to get a sewer scope inspection. You're going to have a roofer bid. You're going to have maybe someone look at the garage or whatever. Maybe you're going to have your own private inspection. Maybe you're going to bring a few people by to try to sell it as well. Maybe they just make a quick buck and sell it to them. You are going to be over that property a lot of times, getting photos, whatever, just taking measurements, just taking your notepad over there and figure out what you're going to do to the damn property. It's just easier if you have access to the property. And here's the cool thing. I got this from Ray Bartle. Buyer shall have 15 business days from the date of the contract acceptance and keys being provided to the buyer to perform inspections. This is huge, guys. 15 business days. 15 days doesn't sound all that much. It's just a little over 2 weeks. But 15 business days is actually 3 weeks. Okay? And keys being provided to the buyer. So it might take 3 or 4 days for them to get a key made and put it in the lockbox. And so you have 3 weeks from that date to be able to do that. Okay? So that buys you a lot of time to get your ducks in a row to either close on the property or try to find another buyer. Okay? So these are good clauses, guys. Property is being sold as is. We have the right to tour and inspect the property. And we have a right to put a lockbox at the property. We have 15 business days. Excuse me. And if buyer does not find property satisfactory, this contract shall be null and void, and all earnest money returned to the buyer. This is when buying a property from a for sale by owner. We also have in there, this is a non-brokered deal because we use the special sales contract, but we're not acting as agents and we're not getting commissions or anything like that. And so a lot of the language right here talks about how who's getting paid and what agencies are involved. So we don't have these lines are NA, so we can either just NA these out or put in verbiage as saying that there's no agents and that this is a non-brokered deal. We like to say that there's a non-brokered deal and omit those lines that don't apply. I think the lines have changed because the contract has changed, so we need to update that. But it's going to be your discretion whether you would do that or not. So then moving on, that's the special agreement section. If you want to have an actual inspection writer, there's a whole writer that will talk about inspections and how that works. But I don't use that because I have the verbiage already in here. Some people would like prefer to do that. And then seller's disclosure statement. No seller's disclosure statement will be provided by the seller. And then this is new to the forms here. It's worth mentioning that if you are an agent, you do need to disclose that you are one to the homeowner. So this is the area that you would need to do that. Okay. I think that this is very clunky and it's very hard to in every situation to figure out exactly how to fill this out. Me personally, I think it's very confusing. So I'm not going to comment on this particular section, but this is where you need to fill out that you are an agent. What I've been doing lately, because this is really clunky, and I might be overthinking this thing a little bit too much, but Real Estate Rehab is not a licensed company, and that is the buyer. I happen to own the company, and I am a licensed agent, so I mean, I'm disclosing that I am an agent, but does the company need to disclose that they're an agent? Well, no, because the company's not an agent. So anyway, this is if you are acting as a licensee, like if you are getting commissions. It's a little confusing. Again, I'm going to skip over it because I'm already starting to raise my heart rate up here because I don't like how this section is written. But this is the area in which you would do that. What I have been doing lately is I've just been saying, after I've signed, that owner is a licensed agent. And that's the disclosure that you need to do anyway. So I'm a licensed agent. I'm just saying that the buyer's signature is going to go here. I'm going to put in parentheses seller or buyer is a licensed agent in the state of Missouri. Okay. Sources of compensation to brokers, if there are any, seller or buyer. It's NA. So that's if you're buying from a private seller, you're not going to be doing that. And then you sign it, and all pages need to be initialed by buyer and seller. The way this contract is written, offer has to be accepted by 9 p.m. Of tonight. And then, so when the seller accepts it, they have to put a time and date on it. So the seller is going to say they're accepting it today at, what time is it? 8:53. Okay. That's a crash course in the contract here that we use. This is the board approved forms. Whether you use the one provided to you by Inner Circle through Rick Gibson or this contract, read it and understand how this thing works, because the last thing you want to do is not know and have to look it up and have to look like an idiot and and create a lot of doubt within that seller. Okay. For all intents and purposes, you should never explain this contract to a seller the way that I've explained it to you tonight. This is just for instructional purposes. Again, broken record, but this is my company name. This is the price I'm willing to pay. It's not contingent upon financing. We're going to close it up on 6/25/2018. It is being sold as is with sellers who no repairs or provide inspections. Sign here. That's how I'll explain the contract to the person. Okay. There's two objections. Well, there's several objections. If it's price, well, if then negotiations. Remember, when there's any objection, if then negotiation. But the main things are price, closing date, earnest money, lockbox, those types of things. There's not going to be too many other things, guys, but those are the main ones. Have legitimate canned responses to those that you practice. Okay. Again, earnest money. My canned response is, well, it's a company policy that we have that as our earnest money. And the reason why is because we have money out there that is unclaimed. And if you, for whatever reason, move to California and go AWOL, well, my money's tied up in that property and I don't get it back for 5 years. And I'm not willing to do that especially when we buy 10 properties a month, sometimes 5 properties a month, even 2 properties a month. That'll still make sense, guys, to a homeowner. It makes sense. That is the exact reason why we don't do it. But there you go. Okay, that's a canned response. Again, canned response for the lockbox. Well, as a company policy, we like to have that, so it's easy for our contractors to meet us over there and give us bids and have our inspectors take a look at the property. It's just ease. You know, you live an hour away. You probably don't want to come up every time we need to have a sewer scope inspected or something like that, or appraisal. If you have a lockbox on the property, it just makes it so much easier for everyone involved. We'll let you know when we're going to be there. We'll make sure that we're there and no one else is in your house without us being there. Is that fair? There you go. Okay. Now, since we are running a little bit into a time crunch here, it's worth mentioning that these rules change slightly when you are buying a listed property. When you buy a listed property, you're probably not going to be able, it's already going to have a lockbox on there, so you don't need to have the same clauses, okay? You're going to want to, sorry, get back to the screen here. You're going to want to have an inspection writer on there. That's the cleanest way to do it. And you don't, this is the clauses that you want to use when you're buying a listed property, okay? Your earnest money is going to be higher. and these clauses can be in there. If you don't use the inspection writer, then the clause is already says there that seller agrees to buyer right to inspect to our view property for 15 business days, and earnest money is going to be returned to the buyer if, in buyer's sole judgment, buyer isn't satisfied with the inspections. So you can do this, or just seller being sold at property being sold as is, and use the inspection writer. It's going to be up to you. If you're going to be buying a listed property, more than likely you're going to be working with an agent. If you are an agent yourself, then maybe you already know this stuff, and this is just kind of a refresher course. But an agent will probably be walking you through this if you're buying a listed property. Now, the third scenario, if you're buying from another investor, I would probably, if I'm buying, if an investor is buying a house from me, I'm gonna want to see some earnest money. $1,000. Come on, guys. If I was buying a house from you, I'd put $1,000 in earnest money as well. Okay, I think that's fair. If it's a $500,000 house, maybe it's more, but $1,000, I'm not going anywhere. You're not going anywhere. So, I would be comfortable putting $1,000 in earnest money if I'm buying a house from you guys. You should feel the same from me. Okay. When we're buying from private sellers, we want to try to have as little money as possible tied up into it. But you buy a house from me, let's put some earnest money in there. That way it's legit, and that's a fair shake. Okay. Also, there's probably already a lockbox on it. If I'm selling it to you, there's probably already a lockbox on it, so you got that. If it's a quick closing, like 2 weeks, well, then we don't need 15 business days for inspections and all that kind of stuff. And most of the time when people are buying a property from us, they're going to be rehabbing it, so they're not going to be re-wholesaling it to somebody else. So, or they're going to keep it as a rental. So, they're not really too concerned about trying to get access so they can wholesale it to somebody else. Sometimes we had a couple last year where we found out the guy wholesaled it after he bought it from us, and we didn't even know it because it wasn't even a conversation that we thought we needed to have. And we didn't care because it was a non-contingent contract with no contingencies on financing, and I think he waived all the inspections too. He was going to buy it whether or not he could wholesale it, which is kind of cool, but he just wholesaled it off. We found out later that he wholesaled it and made another $8,000 off a couple of these deals. We're like, oh my gosh, we left some money on the table. Oh well. But yeah, so that's kind of contracts, guys. I know it's a lot of stuff to kind of decipher here. I went relatively quickly because I didn't want to take 5 hours to do this. This special sales contract, is the form that we use. I have access to it because I'm a realtor. I've been using this special sales contract for years, for almost, 18, 19 years, almost been 20 years in the business. That's crazy. But yeah, been doing this contract. I know it backwards and forwards. I understand how it reads. They change it and update it all the time, and some of the changes I've liked and some of them I haven't. I'm familiar with this. I use this. If you don't have access to this, that's cool, because you do have access to this contract to purchase real estate. Okay. Now, before we jump off here and maybe get to a couple questions, I do want to talk about the two other forms in here. Here's the mutual release. Okay, if you have an inspection, a sewer scope inspection, and it needs a lot of stuff, or you had a guy get up on the roof and it's shot, you need to get a new roof on there, or for whatever reason, to get your earnest money back, if you had to put more than $10 in earnest money, you want to terminate the contract. And to terminate the contract, you need to execute a mutual release. You fill this out. It's got a legend as well. You fill that out, and then the earnest money, you take that to the title company, and the earnest money will be distributed back to you. Okay. And if you do want to assign the contract, here's a very simple assignment of contract that's going to say, with the legend and everything, how you're going to fill this out. I'm going to assign my contract for the consideration of $5,000, and you're gonna be good to go. What I would suggest here also, if you're wholesaling this property and you have it under contract for 100,000, I would write up the assignment for 105,000. That is also going to be the purchase price and $5,000 of the assignment fee. Okay. That's a kind of a good tip because you're selling it for 105,000. They don't know what you have it under contract for. You could have it under contract for 30,000 and you're selling it for 105,000 and you have an $85,000 assignment fee. It's very rare. If you have that, then you should be teaching this class. Yeah, no one needs to know what your assignment fee is. No one needs to know what you have it under contract for or anything. They're going to find out later, but at the same time, can they pay 105,000 for it, and can they put dollars in their pocket? If they think that they can, then that's good enough for them. I would say $105,000 is what you should put on this form, and then they buy your contract. Okay. Now, I know I went quick. These are this is the most common thing contracts that you're going to be using. I think I covered everything that I wanted to cover. If you have any questions, you can just type it in there now, and we can discuss it. I'm going to talk about co-wholesaling in one of these as well, and there's another form called a JV agreement that we're going to talk about, and that's a really good way as an exit strategy to sell some of your houses. But for today's purpose, what I wanted to cover is the contract to purchase real estate, how to fill it out, what it really means, how to talk to the homeowner about it, and if you've got nothing else from this, I think the main thing is take a look at this, read it, make sure that you understand it like you've been looking at it for 20 years so that you don't sound like a bumbling idiot when you're in front of a seller trying to talk about something that you don't know the answer to, okay? So I hope I did a good job of covering all this stuff, guys. I guess the last thing I'll say here is everything is negotiable, okay? You don't get what you negotiate, or you don't get what you deserve in life. You get what you negotiate for. My first real estate broker told me that. The guy who got me into real estate. That was one of the first things he told me when I got into real estate was you don't get what you deserve in life. You get what you negotiate for. Okay? So all of these things that are on the contract and all the houses that we buy and all the prices that we pay and all the closing dates that we have and all the title companies and all the inspections, everything is negotiable. You don't get what you deserve in life. You get what you negotiate for. And whenever anyone's trying to negotiate something or question you or something, if-then negotiations. We're going to talk a lot more about that in another session here. But if I were to increase the price, then would you accept my offer? You haven't increased your price yet. You've just said, if I were, then would you accept it? Okay. And really the reason why you want to do that is because you don't want to say, okay, I'm willing to pay 100,000. But they say, no, we want 110. Okay, I guess I'll pay 110. If it's still a good deal to you, you pay it if that's the lowest that they'll take. But then they'll say, oh, well, I don't like this closing date, or I don't like this clause, or I don't like this, or I want to change this. So don't concede to anything until you know exactly all the things that they have issues with. Figure out which ones. It might just be one issue. It might be 3 issues. But don't concede any of those points until you figure out exactly what the deal is. If I were to do this, then would you accept my offer? Well, no, I don't like the closing date. Okay, well, if I were to change the closing date, then would you accept my offer? Well, no, I don't like the lockbox. Okay, well, if I were to remove that and try to figure something else out, then would you accept it? Well, no, I don't like the earnest money. Okay, so it goes on and on. Figure that out. I haven't conceded to any of those points yet, right? I'm just trying to figure out what is the issue that you're having here, and I'm doing that with if-then negotiations. So again, guys, we covered a lot of ground here today. How to buy a house from a private seller, using both of the forms, the one provided to you by us through Rick Gibson, or the board-approved special sales contract through the St. Louis Association of Realtors. Went through the clauses, went through some of the negotiation techniques. I went through how to present that to the seller several times. I know that I said that. And if we don't have any questions, I'm going to go ahead and say I hope that you guys picked up a couple tips. I certainly had a great time here tonight. Thanks for being on the call. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please let us know. We look forward to seeing you at the next event. And like always, Nick signing off. We'll see you at the top or from the top. Talk to you soon.